people will join us. But I want to welcome everybody to our CASFS virtual open house. My name is Stacy Philpott, and I am the director of CASFS, the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems at UC Santa Cruz. And today we are super excited to share with you the results of our year-long strategic planning process and also to share updates on what CASFS is working on right now. So we would like to start our presentation today with the UCSC land acknowledgement. Although we gather in remote spaces, the land on which the UCSC campus rests is the unceded territory of the Owasawa speaking UP tribe. The Amamutsan tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to the Mission Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. So here is a word cloud that we're sharing based on the words that you all entered when you registered for the webinar about what you think of when you think of CASFS, the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. Just to give you a hint, we will address many of these things today in our presentation. So here is a roadmap for this afternoon's presentation. I'm going to first offer a quick overview of the CASFS year in review, and then we'll focus to talking about the CASFS mission and 3 types of programs that we run that are directly addressing that mission: experiential education, research, agricultural extension and production, and basic needs and public service. Then we'll turn to talking about our new CASFS vision and our work on equity integration by sharing information about our equity statement, work of the Social Justice Advocacy Committee, and our ongoing community engagement. We'll end the presentation by presenting some updates about CASFS facilities. So I want to point out that we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, but you'll also see a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So feel free to type in questions at any time during the presentation, and members of our presentation team can answer your questions as we go along. If there are questions that are not answered during the presentation, we'll try to address those during the Q&A session at the end. So we plan on the presentation lasting for about an hour with plenty of time for questions afterwards. So what did this year in review at CASFS entail? Well, many of you may know that the inspiration was initially taking a year off from the apprenticeship program in order to revise and update that program in particular. But as we talked about it more among staff and with our students, it really began to make sense to examine all of CASFS programming together, and our work blossomed into a full-fledged review and strategic planning process. And so during this time, we reworked the CASFS mission and created new vision and value statements. We have together restated our commitment to equity integration at the center. And we also have done a lot of work to realign our program areas with a main focus on integration and cross-pollination among different educational and research audiences and program areas. So in terms of what the process looked like, our review had 5 main steps or phases, many involving tools and materials unfamiliar to many of us. In the fall, we worked in thematic groups and had series of meetings for particular groups of staff and students looking at things like the apprenticeship, research, facilities. And these meetings were meant to analyze the current status of different CASFS areas and to focus on our strengths, challenges, and opportunities moving forward. In December, we hosted an external review team, and I want to give a huge shout out to Ann Thrupp, Leonard Diggs, and Mark Van Horn, who conducted a really thorough external review and provided a detailed report with tons of constructive feedback for us. In December through March or April, we worked with 2 external facilitator organizations, Soil and Shadow and the Center for Whole Communities. They guided us through a lot of team building exercises, work on organizational development, mission, vision, values work, and in building our equity integration work at CASFS. Really luckily for us, we were able to actually have a few in-person retreat days with all of our staff in early March. Following that in the spring, we took all of the materials and feedback from the thematic groups, from the external review, and from our facilitated work to convene plenary discussions where we really talked about how to realign our program areas and began to draft up our strategic plans. So in early July, we turned in our strategic plan report to Dean Catherine Mitchell of Social Sciences and the Executive Vice Chancellor, Lori Kletzer. Both of them have been very supportive and excited about what we're proposing for the future of CASFS. Since July, and really since a little bit earlier, we've been working on implementing many areas of our plan, as well as adjusting to our new COVID reality. So speaking of COVID, I do want to mention that although we are, of course, tremendously excited about our plans, a lot of what comes in the next year is, of course, still uncertain because of the reality that we're all living. So many of you may be really eager to get back to the farm and back to the Chadwick Garden. Believe me, so am I. But the spaces right now are still closed to the general public due to campus COVID restrictions, and we will open as soon as we can. So moving on to the next step in our roadmap, we really want to focus on the CASFS mission areas. And I'm excited to share with you the new CASFS mission. Next slide, please. So the new CASFS mission is not a huge divergence from our previous mission, but it is a very strong restatement and framework on which the rest of our work builds. The mission of the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems is to advance agroecology and equitable food systems through experiential education, participatory research, agricultural extension, and public service. And with that, I will turn it over to our next presenter, who will share our plans on experiential education.
Hi, I'm Claire, Claire Reisman, and I am the assistant manager of the Chadwick Garden, and as a graduate of the CASFS's undergraduate programming and the apprenticeship programming as well. I'm really excited to share with you some updates in apprenticeship and undergrad. So next slide. The biggest news from the undergraduate education world is that the new undergraduate degree program in agroecology was launched just weeks ago at the start of the fall quarter, with many students already enrolled. 4 required core courses in the major use CASFS as necessary teaching facilities, further anchoring the critical role of CASFS in the educational mission of the university. The new major is a culmination of vision and work dating back to the founding of the Center for Agroecology, with a critical push by current CASFS faculty and staff leadership over the last 7 years. The work of establishing the major has been supported by decades of patient investments by the Heller Foundation and USDA educational granting programs. Next slide. CASFS prioritizes educational opportunities and service to students from historically and currently oppressed and underserved communities, working with on and off-campus partners that focus on educational equity, inclusion, and diversity. Next slide. More than half a dozen USDA projects have been awarded to CASFS faculty and staff to develop and instructionally link the agroecology major's curriculum with the CASFS farm, gardens, and campus food system. These same grant projects have focused on underrepresented student recruitment and retention programming, partnering with regional community colleges, high schools, and community-based organizations. Next slide. Undergraduates are playing a central role through student staff positions, taking on significant operations tasks and assistant managing. These positions are responsible for supporting production, instruction, research, food distribution, culinary, and basic needs. Students gain valuable professional and personal development through a diversity of roles and responsibilities. The revenue from student-grown and distributed produce funds the paid student staff positions, a critical element in educational equity and access, helping to drive student recruitment and retention programming. Next slide. CASFS undergraduate programs span work sites across the campus farm and gardens, including production, curricular, and co-curricular instruction, research, culinary arts and nutrition, and basic needs. Together, these programs offer a wide diversity of engagement opportunities across agroecology and food systems through coursework, workshops, events, internships, and paid student staff positions. Next. This is something I'm really excited about. This fall, we're kicking off our fall remote internship program. So CASFS usually hosts 75 to 90 interns a year, and this fall, COVID restrictions on in-person fieldwork led staff to pivot to a remote internship format that has powerfully drawn together the diversity of CASFS sites and staff into a single integrated introductory survey of CASFS programming. CASFS stands poised to pivot back to in-person instruction when available, with plans for a full production season ahead with basic needs, CSA, and market stand. Next slide. CASFS mission, vision, and values serves as a guide to focus programming on underserved and siloed student audiences, to work on empowering diverse student voices, and to provide equitable access to experiential education opportunities. And those are the relevant updates from undergraduate education. And let's shift over now to our other main offering in the world of experiential education, the apprenticeship. Next slide. So as many of you know, last fall, we decided to take a chrysalis year to revamp and revise our apprenticeship program and curriculum to better meet the needs of our participants, our staff, and to more seamlessly integrate with all the wonderful programs that have emerged at CASFS since the apprenticeship got going. We have been hard at work since then, developing an apprenticeship program grounded in the principles of agroecology and built around the strengths of our staff and the opportunities inherent in our relationship with the university and on these beautiful sites. That program will still get to happen eventually, and we continue to refine its components, but we do not, as of now, know specifically when we will be able to safely offer a residential program next. When it's safe to host a residential program again, rest assured we will shout it from the rooftops. What we are able to offer in the meantime is an overview of the direction where we're headed with the apprenticeship program and an introduction to a new set of programs, which we're calling intensives or short courses, which we will be able to offer sooner. I'll get to those in a minute. Next slide. First, the details of our revised residential apprenticeship. The curricular core of this program remains largely the same. Enthusiastic beginners will be immersed in an experiential study of soil health, plant physiology, crop cultivation, and food distribution, while considering the social and political context in which food is grown. What will be new is the blocking, structuring, and sequencing of these units so that apprentices are better supported in their learning journeys and graduate from our program better able to put these foundational concepts and skills together to sustain themselves and their communities. Next slide. Another new change is that we will be reducing the size of the cohort from 39 to 20 apprentices, hoping that this will lead to greater team cohesiveness and more robust staff to apprentice relationships and support. The who we're looking for in this new apprenticeship program are aspiring farmers and gardeners. These are seasoned beginners coming with some experience and a hunger to learn more and grow. Career transitioners, these are people who have worked in other fields and are interested in a career shift into food and food systems. We are their stepping stone into the world of ag. And also career enhancers. These are land-based educators coming with knowledge as educators, but who want to build out their skills in agriculture and horticulture. Next slide. We've also made changes to our timing as well. As our staff's role in undergraduate programming has grown in recent years, one chief challenge for staff has been balancing staggered learning groups in our sites. And as apprenticeship and undergraduate programming run on opposite and overlapping calendars, that's felt unsustainable, both from a staffing and programming standpoint. To that end, we've aligned our apprenticeship calendar with the university quarter system, and we'll be offering the apprenticeship twice a year for 10 weeks or 1 quarter each, with 2 separate cohorts of apprentices. The exact schedule is yet to be determined, but we will likely be offering either 1 session in the spring and 1 in the summer, or 1 in the summer and 1 in the fall. In another shift, to support staff sustainability and provide a more coherent experience for apprentices, each apprenticeship will be based in 1 garden site, either the Chadwick or the farm garden, with plenty of supplemental offerings, classes, and demos from the other garden site and the field during the quarter. So for example, Farm Garden could host the apprenticeship in the spring quarter, and apprentices would do weekly field walks and demos in the field and attend a series of classes in the Up Garden or classes led by Up Garden staff. Next slide. But what about all of that wonderful material that won't fit into 10 weeks, you might ask? Well, we have found and heard in feedback that not every apprentice is interested in every topic that we try to cover during the course of the apprenticeship. So in an effort to better match learners with specific areas of interest, we've developed what we're calling intensives or short courses. These sessions allow our knowledgeable staff to offer learners from a range of backgrounds a deeper dive into content areas such as propagation, fruit trees, seed sovereignty, flowers, and soils. And although graduates of our apprenticeship will be well suited for these courses, they will be open to anyone with a similar grounding in the foundational principles of and practices of farming and gardening. Next slide. A few other relevant details about the intensives. We are planning to offer our first session on propagation in the spring of 2021. Our initial short courses will be virtual, and we will transition into small cohort in-person formats once it's safe to do so. They'll run anywhere from 1 day to 2 weeks, depending on the content area. And in building on our strengths, we will root the curricular content in the practical, hands-on educational opportunities available in our agricultural sites. In addition, although we are initially building these courses primarily from existing apprenticeship curriculum, we are exploring the possibilities of partnerships across CASFS as well as with partner organizations to be able to offer a more dynamic experience. So that's the report from Experiential Education, and now I'll hand it over to Daryl to let you all know what's happening in research.
All right, well, thanks so much, Claire, and thanks everybody for being here. Excited to share a little bit of what we've been working on in this particular area. And CASFS Research and Extension is something that has a really long and rich history in the center. And so in some ways, when we had this year of revisioning and rethinking, we were really excited to think about how do we kind of rebirth this, this research agenda, this research program? How do we take all the independent work that so many people have been doing and try to bring it together to be maybe slightly more proactive or slightly more collaborative, as Stacy had mentioned early on, to really try to have an agenda ourselves for CASFS research. And again, utilize all the opportunities that we have. And so over the course of the year in review, a couple of us that have been working on research got together to begin this process. And I think in many ways, we probably, while we've all been working independently, we feel maybe a little bit like we're still in the genesis of this process to really understand what does this program look like. So we'll share some of those thoughts today, and are really excited to connect with, I think, so many folks that are on the call today about what this might look like in the future. So when we're looking at the goal that we set out as our team, we really wanted to think about how do we use science to generate and facilitate knowledge creation. And we use those two terms because not only is it about finding new solutions to new ecological problems that may come up in agriculture, but it's also facilitating the questioning of those systems and facilitating the processes so that they don't just happen within house, but that they happen with all of the people that engage with our center. And we identified trying to utilize transdisciplinary and participatory action research in this process, which we'll unpack a little bit later in this short presentation, as a way to just really make sure that our research is grounded in the communities that we're trying to serve. Next slide. So again, when we think about how do we achieve that goal, and oftentimes when we think about CASFS research, we're thinking about, and folks maybe unfamiliar with this area of what CASFS does might think about field trials and soil sampling. And these are really important aspects of agroecological research, but we also know that it's not just about the what that we do for agroecology, but how those principles are taught and how they are, how programs are developed around them that are really going to impact how meaningful our learners and our participants can actually make change in the world. And we wanted to be really clear about understanding, not only are we thinking about the scope that we have to kind of create useful information, and really extend that out into the community. But how do we think about, on a more meta level, how do people teach this? How are programs structured to really serve, again, the broadest range of participants? And these are all research questions that will be explored within our full team. Next slide. So when we think about the strengths and opportunities that we have, this is something, again, this small 4-person team inherited, I think, a huge wealth of work and dedication that had gone into creating CASFS research over the last decades. And so when you think about the incredible opportunities that we have to really build this robust program, first of all, we have the CASFS Organic Farm, which has been organically managed land for over 40 years. And it's fairly rare to have a field site like that we can do some really innovative research trials on. The team itself, I'm definitely the most junior member of it, but has a very productive track record of receiving national level grants and awards. And there's a really shared value across all members of the team for this participatory agroecological research that really spans disciplines. And so while many of us are maybe work specifically in one field or another, we are really committed to kind of working across each other's skill sets. And then perhaps the most exciting things is that there's just abundant campus opportunities for collaboration and support. And I think that we feel like potentially this is an area that CASFS has underutilized in the past. And recently in environmental studies, we've hired a whole host of kind of food systems scholars and people that are working on some of the social science issues around food that we might be lacking a little bit in our team. And we're so excited to collaborate with those faculty and the graduate students that they bring in. And not only is it the Santa Cruz campus, but really UC-wide collaborations, while they have happened in the past in more of an ad hoc way, we're really excited to develop those in a more kind of robust and formal sense. Next slide. And then lastly, all of us have been working in this field for so long that, many of the team, as well as I think the reputation of CASFS, has built a really extensive, strong off-campus network, local, regional, and national, both for farmers, for agricultural, sustainable ag education organizations, and specifically in academia. Next slide. So when we think about how are we going to go about this, or what are some of the pieces of it, again, while we all work in our kind of specific disciplines, we understand that where those disciplines intersect is the place that we can at times do probably some of our best and most innovative research because of how integrated that approach is, to not just looking at, again, what is specifically happening in the field, but really how does that practice or that idea, who does it serve, right? Who benefits from that practice and who doesn't? What are the ways that practice is best communicated to other audiences? And in looking in how all these different pieces overlap, we believe that that's going to be central to the research program moving forward. Next slide. So, and behind all of this, these ideas is this real commitment on our team to have both the long-term and the short-term in mind when we're developing our research program and thinking about what grants we go for and who we work with. And so we absolutely are committed to working on kind of the short term, which is really addressing immediate farmer and leader needs within sustainable agriculture, right? And this is making sure that we're relevant within the community, that we're directly working with the folks that we want to serve, and that we include them in how we make our research agendas. Now that has to be balanced with a long-term view as well, where we really want to we want to sit in the world of the ideal. We want to figure out what are some of the most beneficial practices that we can think about, the most beneficial systems and structures that may not be readily applicable because of economic constraints or market constraints that exist. And we hope that in sitting between these two worlds and making sure that we have our foot in both, that each will actually inform the other, so that we'll stay grounded in the practical realities that oftentimes create the intuition for some of those long-term ideals and trials that will then hopefully lead to some more short-term goals as they become reality. And I think a great example of this is the anaerobic soil disinfestation work that Joji Muramoto has been working on where 15 years ago, you probably would have put that in a kind of ideal category of how we do research. And whereas now it's a widely adopted practice because we focused on that long term, but had our feet in the short term. Next slide. So I'll go quickly through specifically, how these different areas of the Venn diagram and how they work. But, in the agronomic sense, again, this really fits with what I was talking about the short term and the long term. But we really want to work with farmers to address their current pressing challenges around nutrient management, pest management, and some of these new soil health metrics that are coming out, while at the same time tackle these novel and cutting edge approaches that really feel outside of the norm. So, some of those look like interesting alternative rotations to suppress soil-borne disease, and some of our work in that, again, largely organic growers at this point would feel like is not applicable, and yet are very excited to see where the research goes. Next slide. On the education and social science research side, with Jan Perez and Damian Parr, we have folks that are really working in education programming to understand the effectiveness of those programs. So the actual structure in which these programs take place and how they can be the most effective in actually teaching their programs. And then again, at a slightly more meta level to that, there's actually the process of helping people become better change agents through self-reflection. And this is an idea of, through this practice of their exploration, as people understand their own processes, their own strengths and their own weaknesses, their biases, more influence change. Next slide. And extension and education, again, this is where we're really looking about how do we help. This is not so much the structure of the programs, but thinking about the educators themselves. How can we teach adults? How can we teach teachers to actually be better about teaching teaching some of these practices, so that again, the folks that they teach are better able to make change in this, make change in our society. And how do we do this? How do we share our own research findings or collaborate with others to share research findings in really, in really the best way? Next slide. And again, just to bring it all together, when we think about how all these go together, this idea of focusing on really addressing farmer research needs on the constituents that we serve, and including them in the research process to help drive our questions is hopefully going to situate us ideally between, again, both that ideal and the practical in the research realm. Next slide. And our audience is really far and wide. Looking specifically at a lot of diversified small and organic farms and all different parts of that ecosystem, from the farm workers to the gardeners to local NGOs. Focusing on these recruitment and retention programs for undergrads, as well as looking at our state and national food systems organizations. So we have links to all of these groups, and we look forward to tapping into those in a more robust way. Next slide. There's a whole host of current projects that we're working on that we're kind of already in the pipeline, and we're excited to be thinking about more and more how do we structure new grant proposals to fit within this idea that we're starting to play with of a real participatory action approach. Next slide. So that kind of wraps up some of our the research update. I've also been tasked with talking about CASFS production, which we know from the surveys there's a lot of interest in. And 2020 ended up being very fortuitous for us in that we really ended up not planned for a really limited production with no CSA. And then with COVID, we ended up not doing the market card as well. So the fields got a rest, and we had a lot of summer cover crops out there, some unique practices with occultation, which can be discussed at a later time. And some rest and recovery for the fields and gardens. But we're ramping up to do really full production into 2021, again, with lots of unknowns on the horizon. But that's what we're moving towards right now, and we're really excited about that.
Thank you, Daryl. And good afternoon, everyone. Greetings, Tim Galarno, He/They Education and Research Specialist with CASFS. I've been an active staff member for 15 years and a former student and CASFS fan in my early experiential learning stage at UCSC. At present, I oversee a dynamic staff and student staff team dedicated to connecting CASFS to the campus and larger community. Next slide. So while our farm to college work began nearly 2 decades ago, the emergence and work focus on basic needs launched just 6 years ago. This evolution reflects CASFS's commitment and interest in further student-engaged learning and connections that are centered in equity and justice. Farm to college and real food work look to center how we as a campus build a value-based food system, sourcing from local, organic, fair, and humane vendors, and a commitment to deepening our relationships across the food system. So while students with meal plans benefited from our work with dining and college housing and educational services, there have been a larger range of students without meal plans that face hardships that include food insecurity amidst other challenges in attending higher education. And it's this population our work has progressed to support, connect, and uplift. We're excited to share where we've moved from in this time, even amidst COVID. Next slide. So today I'd like to cover some of the dimensions of our work to date. This includes advancing our production and sourcing partnerships, distribution and access support, the emergence of the Cowell coffee shop and soon to be launched mobile resource hub, our curricular and co-curricular engagement, and some of our response and planning and sustainability measures in these times. And so to begin with, next slide, I'd love to situate our basic needs production and sourcing. So as we began 2 decades ago, connecting the field site to producing for the campus food system, we realized students were integral to that experience. And as we moved 6 years ago into producing more for students in need, we realized we needed a 4-season approach. And we brought on hoop houses that Daryl and other members of our presentation team have worked with students to integrate production cycles to meet the student needs on campus. And as the production committee touched on above, production for basic needs as well as for other avenues were seriously limited during 2020. We were able to harvest and donate the last crops in our hoop houses to food security initiatives on campus, as well as our perennial crops out of the field, such as apples and plums from the orchard. And we're planning to ramp up production, starting to plan out the hoop houses again this quarter for harvest and distribution for basic needs in winter 2021, moving into full-scale production for spring. Luckily, the farm garden and Chadwick garden contributed to basic needs distribution during our production pause at the field site. The farm garden has been contributing hot peppers, cherry tomatoes, tomatillos, and more. The farm garden based their summer crop plan for basic needs on our cultural foodways survey that went out a few years ago to understand what culturally relevant crops we could grow on the farm to contribute to pantries on campus for a diverse student population. We're planning on releasing a more thorough version of the survey on a wider scale to get better data this upcoming year in collaboration with our campus food distribution and pantry team so we can understand how to better honor the diverse foodways of the students that access our basic needs resources at UCSC. Key to our production efforts for basic needs is the leadership development model, which builds student leadership skills and capacity, as well as ensuring that students are at the forefront of leading and directing our efforts. We're continually aiming to ensure that we bring students into our decision-making processes since students know how we best can serve them. And even with our pause in production on the field site, there's been no pause in service providing locally organic produce to food access resources on campus. We've developed a partnership with the Santa Cruz Farmer Market Association and have been able to specifically partner with farms such as Happy Boy and Live Earth Farms for our procurement efforts. We're excited to continue partnering with Farmer Market Association into the future to highlight all of their incredible programs, specifically their EBT Market Match program to students as part of our work. Next slide. So moving from production into distribution, one of our key partners is Slug Support Pantry, operated out of the Dean of Students Office. And the Slug Support Pantry supports the success of all students. The pantry team believes that access to food is a human right and are dedicated to destigmatizing food insecurity. The Slug Support Pantry is open to any UC Santa Cruz student. All you need is your student ID. They're a choice-based, no-limit pantry, meaning there are absolutely no limits to what you take or how many times you access the pantry in a week. The pantry is located at the Cowell coffee shop and open 3 to 4 days a week in this quarter. The image you see in the slide is during COVID and the fire evacuation on campus, we were able to pivot and offer off-site distribution for students when the coffee shop was closed to continue to meet students as they were struggling with crisis and adjustment in that time. And I think that's the underlying spirit of this work. Both the students and staff are deeply committed to seeing the success of our students, even in the face of their own challenges. Another part of our developments is a produce pop-up team. Our produce pop-up is an on-campus farmer market, which pre-COVID served in 2 locations on campus in the Bay Tree Plaza and Rachel Carson College. And what that system did was bring up local organic produce and farm produce and offer a 75% off market system, which is almost like a triple up bucks program for students that they could come by for their 4-hour open hours and pick up delicious organic food at 2 locations on campus weekly. During COVID, the produce pop-up team has operated remotely and have planned to partner with Family Student Housing in addition to their bi-weekly or twice-a-month distributions with USDA and our farm-provided produce and farmer market produce to, on the offside weeks, bring food recovery efforts and product from the farm and the coffee shop over to parenting students and students with dependents. And they're currently initiating a survey to assess an offsite location for students that are local to the campus during hybrid instruction and seeking food relief but not needing to go on campus so we can meet students where they're at. Family Student Housing, or FISH as we fondly call it, that biweekly distribution supports 150 families on the west side of campus. Our other post-COVID plans are to continue our support of the undocumented student efforts and EOP, further serve our students on the west side of campus, and cater to our Ethnic Resources Center, Cantu Center, and the Transfer Student Center. Next slide, please. So the Cowell Coffee Shop launches a 5-year MOU with College Housing and Educational Services to provide a connective space on campus to build out our field to plate vision for resourcing students. Our underlying framework, akin to Lewis Hyde's The Gift, seeks to provide a generative, non-transactional experience that nourishes students with meals, snacks, workshops, and basic needs support services, such as CalFresh Assistance. Pre-COVID, we served 2,000 to 3,000 unique students per quarter, and we're open for over 60 hours a week, largely student-run and led. During COVID in the spring, we provided meal kits for scheduled weekly meal pickups that included local organic and culturally diverse weekly offerings that would serve to 10 to 13 meals per meal kit box to minimize student exposure while seeking their supplemental food support. Across summer and this year, we've partnered with Slug Support Pantry to provide weekly selections of prepared and fresh food offerings out of the Cowell Coffee Shop space, open for students 3 days a week this quarter. In addition to the essential on-site student staff support, we've continued to offer remote experiential education opportunities, as noted with our undergraduate comments by Claire through our remote internship, as well as online workshops and a range of culinary videos. Moving forward, we'll be launching a mobile kitchen. That's a 16-foot California Code kitchen on a 20-foot double axle trailer to meet students across sites on campus to add convenience and synergize our programming with other units and organizations as we build our village of collaboration at UC Santa Cruz. And in addition, we aspire to reconnect and open our non-transactional cafe offerings post-COVID while building out further online and remote resources and offerings. And we're excited to continue to build that vision forward with all of you. Next slide. So in closing, I really wanted to emphasize the incredible scope of work taking place, even amidst COVID. And some of those elements include lifting some of our COVID protocol from the field and farm to how we serve at sites that meet students on campus, like the Cowell Coffee Shop. Our responsive and thoughtful COVID protocol has been lifted up for other basic needs pantries and support efforts across the University of California. We've also been facilitating a system-wide best practice food distribution and pantry pod, we call it, with practitioners to build out new resources and share the work taking place. And that pod, I'm proud to say, is student co-led as we continue to model students in the experiential leadership realm. Further, our remote internship and class partnerships are extending. We're really excited to have a synergized multi-site offering from CASFS. And we're also reaching out to courses that are looking for co-curricular partnerships that link to our basic needs efforts. And I would also love to just note some of the research and practitioner efforts underway. So basic needs as a public service does bridge into the other facets of CASFS. Currently, we're working with computational media and the Blum Center to launch a UC-wide basic needs app for students that link to real-time food distribution pickups and services available at all 10 campuses. So during remote instruction, students will be able to look at the campus closest to them and the resources available to support their success. We've also reached out and working with the Ecology Center in Berkeley on a statewide market match promotion program that links for students so that they're aware of how they can use their CalFresh dollars at the closest farmer markets to them. And not only is that through the UC, but as our relationships at CASFS extend out, we're partnering with the community colleges and the California State University system to build that out across all of our segments in higher education. And further, we're exploring private foundation and public grant opportunities to build on and expand our innovative field of service site efforts with basic needs. And in addition, we'll look to prioritize further resources for supporting an increase in student leadership and workers across site. As our Giving Day effort this fall indicated, we are trying to build students into the DNA and backbone of CASFS for their experience. So stay tuned for a late fall donor meal kit opportunity to support our basic needs programming. And with that, I'll pass it on. Thanks so much.
All right, well, thank you to Claire and Daryl and Tim for walking us through new aspects of the CASFS mission. And we're going to move on to the third point in our roadmap and talk about the CASFS vision and equity integration. So I will turn it over to our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Matsushita Sang. I'm the assistant manager in the farm garden, and I'm excited to share with you the new CASFS mission, CASFS vision and values. So we envision an equitable food system that empowers local communities, builds relationships, and nourishes all people and the environment. The work of CASFS is rooted in collaboration and innovation. We are committed to fostering diversity throughout the center and equity and access to food, resources, and knowledge. From the soil to the table, we value service and operate with a commitment to respect, transparency, integrity, and accountability. Next slide, please. One of the main ways that we move towards living out this vision and values is through the work currently being done through the Social Justice Advocacy Committee, or SJAC. The SJAC committee was previously a group that worked only within the apprenticeship, but it now has members from many committees and program areas from across the center so that we can have insight and collaboration across all the different areas. In the past, some examples of work that SJAC has done is advise on curriculum, support with staff training, and now SJAC is working to advocate for and recommend organizational and programmatic adjustments that will support the alignment of CASFS within its mission, vision, and values, and builds towards a more inclusive and equitable working and learning environment for everybody. The equity statement is the largest project that the SJAC committee is currently working on. I'll share more about that in just a moment. SJAC is also advising and supporting with partnership development, particularly on strategy around prioritizing partnership development with equity-centered community-based organizations, as well as developing strategy to leverage CASFS resources to better support community partners and grassroots organizations, in addition to amplifying support and solidarity for the Ama Mutsun tribal band. Next slide, please. So the CASFS equity statement asserts our organizational commitment to equity and discusses how we can push beyond inclusion and move towards equity within our programming and within our organization, and relates to how we will be living out our newly defined CASFS values. It contextualizes our work against the history of the food system, the indigenous land history that CASFS sits on, as well as our role and responsibility in the contemporary US food system. It frames our work in three different areas, programs, organizational change, and facilities and space. And within each of these topics, there are a multitude of topics. Some examples include, under the program area, increasing language accessibility for programs and resources created by CASFS, supporting development of culturally relevant curriculum and pedagogy. Under the organizational change section, some examples include creating job training and professional development trajectories for student and staff, creating internal accountability processes such as organizational charts, decision-making, communication protocols, and cross-programmatic committees to encourage transparency and visibility of our work. Some examples in the facilities and space section include improving and maintaining physical accessibility around the farm, and welcoming and accessible signage. Next slide, please. So how will this all work? SJAC has been developing several different tools to support the implementation of the equity statement. These tools are the Equity Integration Design Rubric. This will be used by the CASFS team as a planning and design tool to think about creating the container in which we hold programming and do our work, and provide guidance on centering equity from the start. The next is the Equity Integration Assessment, which will be used as a tool after implementing programs or projects to reflect, assess, and make adjustments on how to better meet equity goals as the CASFS team. And participant evaluations, which will be used as a tool to move beyond historical program evaluations to assess program experiences of access, program participant experiences of access, equity, belonging, empowerment, and ultimately program efficacy in terms of how well we are meeting the needs of our audiences. Equity has recently become integrated into each job description of CASFS staff. And a huge part of the strategic planning process has been creating and sustaining an organizational commitment to this work, which is multi-pronged and involves the effort and deep work of everyone. And includes lots of learning, training, and continued work that will create personal, organizational, and food systems change. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Oren to talk about community engagement.
Farm and garden, and in fact, as a longtime gardener too. Two things at the outset. Thing one, I'd like to give a shout out to the OG, that is the Friends of the Farm and Garden Affiliates Group. In a sense, a very real sense, they were our original community engagement committee dating back to their inception under the guiding hand of Louise Kane in 1974. Then as now, they assisted on many fronts: political, logistical, monetary, and certainly community outreach through events like public workshop, plant sales, and tours. They are now poised, willing, and able to take the next steps with us as we seek to make our outreach broader and more inclusive. And thing two, as we sat down to plan community engagement, we wanted the hay barn, that marvelous edifice symbolizing the fusion of past, present, and future, to be a hub for staging all manner of community events to an ever-expanding community. Ground zero, as it were, a kind of informal entrance to South Campus, a place of congregation, when congregation is safe once again. And who knows, maybe our CSA pickup site and a venue for future plant sales too. Additionally, under the guidance of Aaron Foley, we will be upping the ante as per our social media, a new quarterly e-newsletter coming soon, a revised CASFS website, and that oh so old-fashioned but still trustworthy medium, the written word, words on paper even, via the news and notes. But let me move from the aggregate to the granular, to use a soil science analogy. We now find ourselves at a curious juncture, at the confluence of appropriate and cautionary COVID-related in-person restrictions, and both a need and a strong desire to create content that reaches out to gardeners and farmers wherever they are, practitioners, whether vocational or avocational, diverse people working along the continuum of the food system and creating a more transformative food system. Okay, and you heard it from me. Presently, the best vehicle going forward is the internet, and primarily Zoom and video. Our immediate aim, basically getting more of our farm and garden-based expertise captured and preserved via video, Zoom talks, and Q&A sessions to boot. Ironically, these mediums create greater access. Hey, everybody has a front row seat, no obstructed view seats, visual and oral acuity. Eventually, we have grand plans, professionally produced video sessions that capture the full season, actually the 4 seasons of garden and field-based demonstration, a how-to archive. These videos can stand alone for now, but can also be used in conjunction with live and in-person classes and courses for many audiences eventually. But initially, we will start small and then build. In fact, some of these efforts are already underway. As mentioned, we are offering a CASFS-wide remote undergrad internship, both fall and winter quarter. And I've given a number of sessions already via both the Friends of the Farm and Garden and the Santa Cruz Public Library. Personally, I'm all in with monthly talks and Q&As and videos as well. And as you can see from the slide, a sampler of free online workshops upcoming with more in the works. Initially, the presenters will be staff and alumni. A couple of teasers, previews of coming attractions. Scott Chang Fleeman, now farming in Bolinas, an apprentice grad, has offered a session on Asian vegetables. And I'm hoping, really hoping, we farmer gardener types can hook up with Brooke Schmidt of Basic Needs in the Cowell coffee shop to do a series of seed to skillet sessions. Hey, here's how you grow it. And then, hey, here's how you use it, cook it, and preserve it too. And I suppose the same thing could be done for flowers with some of our floral alum. Seed to bouquet, provisioning for biodiversity all along the way. In all of this, we will seek advice from our Social Justice Advocacy Committee regarding topics, equity, and relevance. But I'd like to solicit your topical ideas too. And if you can provide logistical or technical support, by all means. And if you are so inclined to support these efforts in a monetary fashion, well, don't be shy. We welcome your input. Okay, stay calm, garden on, preserve the legacy of 10,000 years of farming on the planet. Over to you, Audrey.
Thanks, Oren. That was wonderful. Want to just say that we're excited about all of the things that we have done so far. As you've been hearing about the various programs and people who are involved in them. What we've done through the strategic planning process is we've been involved with looking at facilities across all of our lands here. As you'll see from this slide, we have 33 acres of farm and gardens, which amazed me, and also the 30 structures that dot the landscape. Structures that have been here since before the campus became a campus, structures that were built 30 to 40 years ago, and our most recent structure, the historic Cowell Ranch hay barn, which was restored, an edifice that is worthy of its name. Next slide. One of the things that we felt was very important as a team of our facilities group, which was comprised of Kim Chamlin, Heidi Harris, Dave Stimpson, and a few others, is that we wanted to look at 3 areas specifically in the immediacy to really enable us to provide an environment that was welcoming, that helped people know that they belonged. As you'll see on this slide, we are looking at safety and sanitation and health. Safety, looking at the signs across the farm and garden, wanting to ensure that people know not only how to get from one area to the next, but that individuals also are aware of what to do when an emergency occurs. We want to ensure that all of our staff are trained, that our vehicles are safe, that the grounds and buildings will support a safe environment for everyone who comes to visit the farm and garden. Sanitation is also very key. We have pests and vegetation management that is critical to the success of not only our crops in the research trials, our crops that are a part of the food that is developed and delivered to Basic Needs, to our CSA members, but we also want to ensure that it's a safe place sanitary place and that the pests are managed so that they don't get into the buildings or that they just take over. We want to make certain that our buildings are inspected, our equipment is inspected, and when needed, repairs are made and done quickly. We also looked at the health and are looking at the health of what's taking place here at the Farm and Garden. We have food safety protocols in place, yes, we do, but we know that we can improve upon them. And with that goes to our post-harvest production, as well as to preparing food in our farm center. We want to not only document what to do, but to train people so that there is continuity across what's taking place in the Farm and Garden. Most importantly, at this time, this juncture in our reality, integrating COVID-19 protocols. That's what we are doing in alignment with the university. We make certain that our buildings are identified as to how many people can be inside, what they need to be doing, as we have all heard, make certain that you have masks on, be certain that you're cleaning your hands. All of those things are a part of our COVID protocols currently. In addition, however, because it's a farm and garden, we have kits that we have available for our staff members that are comprised of face masks and gloves and other cleaning materials, so that the tools are also a part of what's taking place throughout as we're working on the farm and garden. Next slide. So as I indicated, we have buildings that have been here for 30, 40 years. So you can imagine that there might be some upgrades that are needed. For example, we have buildings that were once heated by wood stoves. And now, based upon the university's sustainability initiative, we are unable to use wood to heat our buildings. Therefore, we're needing to upgrade to natural gas. We also have been partnering with the university to look at some of the seismic retrofits that might be needed in some of our buildings so that we can ensure that the buildings are earthquake safe as well. But it's not just looking at the old buildings and upgrading them, which is super important. We're looking forward to a new building that would be emblematic of the hay barn that is down at the base of our farm and garden. As you'll see in this slide on the lower right-hand corner, there is a building that is comprised of a shower and bathroom facility all in one place. Wouldn't that be spectacular? We've been dreaming of something like that, and we've had a feasibility study done. We're starting to dream of what this could look like. And we know that with partnership, with determination, preservation, we'll be able to have a facility such as this for not only our apprentices, our students, our staff, but visitors who come as well. We partner with the university. We partner with students and those who come and take our courses. And we also partner with you, those of you who have joined us today, from right down the street in Santa Cruz to across the country. We know that you're here, and we want to thank you for joining us. What you've heard today, whether it's the programs for students, the research that's taken place, the updates that we're planning for the apprenticeship programs, as well as our community engagement and social justice action advocate committee work, all of that has been done with the mindset that we want to continue doing great things as we have before. And we invite your partnership in this way. We know that many of you are planning for your year-end giving, and we know that that is something that's coming up pretty soon. Whether it's from looking at your company policies to see, do you have a matching gift program there? Maybe perhaps you're thinking of looking at your stocks and options, and you're wondering whether or not CASFS would be the place to provide that. We are saying, yes, we are. We also recognize that there may be some of you who are looking to do some estate planning and thinking about how you can make an impact, not only for now, but in the future, we invite you to join with us, to partner with us in our programs, in our facilities, in our future. You can do that by going to casfs.ucsc.edu. You can certainly make a gift there, or perhaps you'd like to just get some more information. You have some questions about the programming that would be related to your giving. You can always email us at casfs@ucsc.edu, as you see on the screen. I really want to thank you all for being here today and participating with us as we've been able to share this good work that we've done this year, and look forward to sharing more with you in the future.